clubpod.co, clubpod.co, clubpod.co. Okay.
Hi folks, this is another podcast for the clubpod.co podcast. That's clubpod.co, C-O. Not to be associated with anything else that's called ClubPod. It's just me doing it on my own. Now, today I'm going to cover two subjects, both the ClubHouse app again and the buying of domain names, the .clubs, because they're both connected in many ways. So the first bit is, a lot of people seem to be getting very excited over the ClubHouse app, which I think is a bit over the top because in truth everyone under the sun's copying this style, and I suspect you'll be able to just download a free plugin, or maybe there'll be a few paid ones for maybe $5-6 for WordPress sites, and it won't be that uncommon to see. Now I think Twitter virtually rolled out their version, and the advantage they've got is they're ready to rock and roll on all platforms such as iPhone, Android and online, web-based. And that's the sort of killer for ClubHouse at the moment. Just being Apple only, iPhone only, and not online either yet. Well, there's some bits of it seem to be, means that they could end up losing out to competition. If they can get in first with similar, even better products, then it's basically game over for ClubHouse. People just say, well, why bother? Now the second problem they've got is being able to download things. I mean, at the moment you're not supposed to. There's like a grey area of what you can record. Some of these clubs are recording them by sticking maybe a warning little thing on the ClubHouse saying a red button. Trouble is, if somebody complains, which you can see it happening, saying, well, I was recording, I didn't understand, because my understanding is that this is a private site or a private app, and therefore any recordings is going against what I believe. People are going to get into a lot of bother because, well, I've got a feeling they are. I mean, at very least they'll have to delete the recordings off the podcast and whatnot, and even then people are going to say, well, people have downloaded it, blah blah blah. I mean, for me, I wouldn't record anything at the moment from that site, just to save myself the hassle. Not even if it was just to save it on the computer, because you could be in so much hoo-ha these days. Now, the reason why it might succeed, I mean, the advantage they've got is it looks really nice, and they'll be adding a lot of features, and they might get in there quicker. But the trouble is, every other company have got programmers. I mean, I don't know if the aim is to sell it. The trouble is, it's cheaper just to pay your staff, your programmers, which you've got anyway, a bit of overtime, to come up with your own site or add-on or whatever. For instance, Twitter, you could imagine, when they've got the name Twitter alone, they could even convert the whole site to being a bit like ClubHouse, with the Twitter bit as a secondary, not the main bit. So you could send messages to each other, but just in a way on YouTube you can post comments below. You could be doing something like that on Twitter. It's quite easy to, they could easily change it. After all, it's getting a bit stale as Twitter, and it'd be quite a way of refreshing the format for them. And you could imagine every pod site, they're fighting under the sun for customers because they're basically cloning each other. Well, it makes sense for them to do their own version and allow people to record shows. At the moment, after all, is it not Spotify? I mentioned it the other day, I'm walking the dogs, I forget the name. The one begin with A or something .fm. Not Anarchy, I'm thinking Anarchy, but it's not Anarchy. They seem to have a thing on the website where you can have people sending messages verbally to add in your podcast. So you can see the format can be copied, and like I said, if you don't understand WordPress, basically it's a free download, and you can use it as a blog and all sorts, but you can add on extra bits, plugins, so you could turn your site into a YouTube site and all sorts. Now, the difficulty is for an amateur isn't get the site up and running. It's you need to understand about running your own server. So the dog lead might be making a lot of noise, and the amount of bandwidth and whatnot, which is getting cheaper. But you see, YouTube uses, from what I gather, a huge amount of resources to store all the data and run things, and a lot of these sites do. They cost a lot of money to run, so running it, unless you can work out a way to make money from it, could be incredibly expensive. There's a lot of these sites, after all, aren't making a profit. The idea is they get investors who'll plough millions into it in the belief that in years to come they'll start making a profit from the amount of users you've got. The downside is you're bound to have sites or apps go wayside that'll never produce any money because people just get bored and move on. Now, it's obvious Facebook will have to do a version because they don't want to lose out on customers, and you could imagine things like TikTok and all these. I mean, after all, now all sites, if you look, are sort of cloning each other, so virtually most will let you do upload video to a degree, some just a minute, some longer. Others they all seem to allow you to do live broadcasting. You can go on and chat on your phone to people or via your computer, and all seem to virtually allow you to text each other. The similarities is they're all basically coming together as the same sort of system, just whatever the site you like the look of. So that's the danger. It might not be the sort of hoo-ha everyone seems to be basing on it. And the other part, which I've said this before, is many of the big club things are as dull as dishwater. They seem to be populated by people who are pretending that, or they might be claiming they're big business people and how they'll make you rich. And I've listened, you can listen for hours and it's just drivel. They'll talk meaningless garbage, but everyone thinks it's wonderful, and they all get big whoopsies over it. But they'll just sit there talking utter gump, just a few buzzwords telling you to be positive and all this rubbish, without really helping you any form business or anything. It's just feel good factor. And I suspect the only people who ever make money from this feel good factor is the people who are flogging their books or whatever it is, telling you how to ignore everyone else and how they know the answers to making it rich, blah blah blah. And I think I've only been on it probably just coming up to 2 weeks. I'm bored already with it so far. For me, it was interesting, but it's getting, quite honestly, a bit dull, because it's just the same old nonsense you listen to, which I know it pleases some people who are vulnerable and they want to be told that they're going to be rich and everyone's positive and clappy handy and whatnot, but it's a bit dishonest in many ways. A bit like some of the podcast sites. People are chatting, they're talking about what podcasts they're going to do, and they're really not going to succeed because they're dull as dishwater what they're coming out with, and yet they're thinking and they're being encouraged to believe that they're going to get millions of views and they're going to be important. I mean, I heard one, and she was quite clear this. She might get a few hundred at most listeners, but the woman told her, you're going to be a millionaire in a year's time. And I thought, oh Jesus, she's going to believe this and invest her time, probably because this woman wanted to invest in her company to promote a site and stuff. of a podcast that hadn't even started yet, and yet she was pushing this idea to her that everything was going to be whoopee-doo and she was going to be successful and all this gobswallops. So that's part one. I'm just going to cross the road, so I'll do part two once I've crossed.